turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We're continuing in this message entitled Sermon on the Mount. This is part number 8, where we are going through verse by verse, portion by portion, through what is known as the Sermon on the Mount. This is Jesus' one of his longest, it is the longest recorded message in the Bible of Jesus. Many believe it was his best message. And we get to now read a transcript of it, if you will. And even though God was talking to a group of people 2,000 plus years ago on the shores of Galilee, even though they was talking to them at that point, we now still, years later, his disciples, followers of Jesus, or even if you're just interested in Jesus and you don't have a relationship, either way, the teachings of Jesus ministers life and hope and godliness to us, and that's where we're diving in. We're taking it portion by portion. This is Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 31. In fact, only out of the Sermon on the Mount are we doing 2 verses today, but man, they are loaded verses. Just as Jesus speaking, it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. Stopping there for a moment. Now, right away, those of you who have a great marriage, you've tuned out, possibly. Those of you that are not married, you've tuned out. Those of you that never want to, or you're not even close to that phase, possibly you have checked out. Let me encourage you, no matter where you're at in your life, and especially in relationship to a marriage, this is something that all of us need to know. This is God himself that is bringing clarity to something in our lives that we need to have biblical perspective on. We need to know what that kingdom of heaven has to say about marriage and divorce and the relationship. This is something pivotal that God has established from the very beginning in order to bring out his plan and his purpose here on this earth. It's not just 2 man and woman coming together and that's it. God literally brings people together to bring about multiple generations and blessings through those generations. Jesus refers to his relationship of Jesus with the church, which is all of us, as a marriage, where he says that he is the groom and we are the bride. And so the way that Jesus describes his interaction and his relationship with his people, us, is by comparing it to a marriage relationship. This is when we have strong marriages, we have strong churches and strong communities and a strong country. And when we have weak marriages, it goes on through as well. The blessing and the curse flows through marriages. Not the only place, but it is something that God has set up as a covenant relationship. Covenant means it's not a contract. As long as you do what you're supposed to do and I do what I'm supposed to do, we're going to be fine. But if you break that contract, or if you do something that is outside of that contract, then now, because of my distrust and disdain for you, we have a real issue. A covenant says that this is for life. This has to carry weight. This is covered by the blood of Jesus Christ. And unfortunately, in the day and age that we live in, we have divorce that is continuing to increase. I remember, and I'm not really that old, but I just remember growing up and earlier on in my years, divorce was still something that was, if I can use this word, a little bit taboo. It's like, oh man, your parents are divorced? That's terrible. Now, divorce is something that is so culturally common that it's just a part of what we do. Well over 50%, or over 50% of marriages end in divorce, and that's among Christians. In fact, some statistics, depending on what you read, share that Christian divorces, there's more of them than there are with those that are not Christian. And so this is not as believers, we've got to figure it out and the world doesn't. This is something that even in the culture of the kingdom of heaven, we have messed up and we have not seen with clear eyes. So we are going to dive into the words of Jesus and kind of rummage through it and find the nuggets that are in here. Because again, I'm only reading 2 verses from the Sermon on the Mount today, but there's a lot that's packed into it. Again, Jesus said, you've heard it said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. Well, he's referring back to a portion of scripture in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. I'm not going to read it, but he's referring back to it because, again, he's talking to people that are Jews that understand and read and know Deuteronomy. And this was one of the things that was said in there is that if you are going to get divorced, you need to give them a certificate of divorce. Now, fair warning, I want to say this right now. Almost all of the language of what I'm going to read in this next few verses is all heavily focused on men. In fact, Jewish culture and tradition was very much favoring men. It gave very little consideration for women. And that's very unfortunate. And that's actually one of the things I love, one of many things I love about Jesus and his teachings. Jesus comes and he brings equality to all of it. He raises up in a culture, in a day and age where women were very much pushed to the fringe of society. They were, if you can say it this way, second-class citizens, maybe even third-class citizens in many of the cultures that were there. Jesus comes in and says, no, actually, under this covenant, under this relationship, there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female. And so God raises up and says, men and women, you are created, you are equal, you are loved, you are my children, my sons and my daughters, and my heart is for you all equally. But Jesus is ministering to a Jewish culture, and he himself is a Jew, and so he is referencing Jewish writings. So don't be offended or tripped up by the language that's used. Understand it's a cultural thing that Jesus, one of the things, again, that Jesus did was come to fix and correct that cultural injustice, which we still see now. It's not like it's completely fixed. It's still very much a rampant issue in our society. But according to the teachings of Jesus, it's not how it should be. Christians should not devalue anyone, male or female, other religions. We should not devalue other races, anything like that. That is not what Christ came, and that is not central in his messages. But Jesus, speaking to who he was speaking to, had to connect with them in a way that they would understand. And so please, do not shoot the messenger. Last week, we talked about sexual immorality, and I got done with it. I'm like, whew, made it through that one. We survived it. And then I read this one. I'm like, well, this will be easy. 2 verses. I got this all day long. Don't get divorced. It's cake. It's easy. This is fine, right? And then I started diving into it. I'm like, ooh, oh, whoa, there's a lot more into this thing. We need to gather some understanding on. So don't shoot the messenger. And Jesus, what he's trying to do, as he's done all throughout the Sermon on the Mount, is say, you understand it this way, you practice it this way, you live and you speak it this way, but I'm here to tell you, not that I'm here to do away with that, but I'm actually here to bring clarity to it because you have missed the mark. So I'm not going to read all of Deuteronomy, chapter 24. 1 through 4, I'm just going to read a portion of it. It says, this is what Jesus is referring to. When a man takes a wife and marries her, if then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, or another terminology they would use was a legal bill of divorce, and puts it in her hand and sends her off, and then it goes on with the rest of the portion of Scripture. So this is looking at a civil law. There's different kind of laws that we read about in the Old Testament. I'm not going to dive into them right now, but there's ones like moral laws, which never change. And there's some that are civil laws that was just for the people of the nation of Israel or for that day and age. Civil laws was kind of more how people interacted in a legal basis, and that's really what this is. It's a civil law that Jesus was bringing clarity to because they had missed the mark. And if you were to continue to read this portion of Scripture, in fact, I found it to be very confusing myself. I read it several times. I had to go, I think when I was said and done, I read 7 different commentaries on this, trying to figure out what in the world Deuteronomy chapter 24 was talking about. And what I landed on, what I understood, and they all had the same consensus, was what it's saying here in a civil kind of conversation is if you are married to someone, again, through the language of men, but it's men or women. Men, if you are married to your wife and she does not please you, I'll clarify that in a moment. She does not please you, you give her a certificate of divorce, you get into her hand and you send her away. And then it says, but if she goes and she gets married again, and then that husband does the same thing for the same reason, then you have caused, then there has been an issue in this, because what it's showing is in the very narrow light of that wife, because she has been divorced for the same reason, it shows that there is not true repentance. Now, that's very harsh, and already guards are up, offenses up, like, how dare he? It's not all her fault. She probably didn't deserve it. It's his fault. Like, I know, like, there's 1,000 different emotions in this room right now, and people are checking out, people are glazing over with their eyes. I get it. Just hang tight for a second. We're going to get there, and we're going to figure this out. This civil law was saying, if you are divorced and you have not changed and you get divorced for the same reason, it shows a pattern and it shows that your heart is not repentant. So that's what Deuteronomy chapter 4 in a nutshell, with, I would say, some pretty abrupt language in there, that's what it says. And again, like I said, when I read it, I was like, wow, that is pretty right there in your face. Like, they're not holding any punches on that one. Jesus has come to do and bring some clarity to this civil law, because there's so much confusion in it. If you were to read that, and by the way, some denominations read it this way, some believers read it this way. If you were to read that, it puts all the power in the hands of the husband. Again, Jesus is not about that. Puts all the hands in the power of the husband. It is an abusive type relationship, because it says, as long as I'm happy and you please me, we can stay married. But if not, then I'm kicking you out. So there's just no rebuttal. There's no conversation on that whatsoever. I'm sick and tired of you. You're out. And what that does is it puts a pattern and a label of shame on the people, on the person that was divorced, the person that was given the bill of divorce or the certificate of divorce. The men could marry and divorce for the most part all they want. There are some limitations in there, but women could not. And so, in my opinion, very skewed, very backwards. It was primarily skewed and backwards because of the interpretation of men. If you actually read it, and you read it through the lens of what Jesus says and through the understanding of it, it's not bad. But I would venture to say, I'm not a gambling man, I don't bet, but if I did bet, probably 90+% of us would read it and go, ugh, that's not good. There's not some good things in there. Well, they were just as confused and frustrated by it as maybe you would be if you read through it. One of the reasons why they were so confused is because there was two different schools of thoughts that was going on here. You kind of belonged to one camp or the other. And the reason why there was two different schools of thoughts is because there were two prominent rabbis at that day and age that had very different interpretations of Deuteronomy chapter 4 and other verses. And remember, in Deuteronomy chapter 4, it said, when a man takes a wife and marries her, if then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her. Well, the rabbis had very different interpretations of what those indecencies were. You had what I would call like the more strict interpretation by one of the rabbis, Shammai, that said that only if she has, or the spouse has an affair, an extramarital affair, only then can you divorce. Okay, well, that doesn't clarify and bring any understanding to, well, what happens if it's a physical or emotional abusive kind of relationship? What happens in a wide variety of situations? The person's just a terrible person. Like, well, how do we reconcile that? Well, the more strict Shammai school of thought, rabbi would say, only if there is an affair can you have a divorce, a certificate of divorce. Well, compare that to what I would consider the more lax point of view, the Hillel teaching, which says that basically, if there is something indecent, something that you see in that person that's not right, it could be something in the way that they interact with you, it could be a physical blemish on them, it could be the way that, you guys hold hands, whatever. Like, if you have something that you look at and you go, this person is now indecent to me, this person doesn't match up and doesn't measure up, kick them to the curb. Well, because of these two extremely polarized perspectives, you can imagine the fighting that goes on. Take ourselves out of marriage for a second. Think about politics right now. We are so diabolically opposed to each other and so polarized, it's near impossible to have a balanced, healthy, forward-thinking conversation. because it's us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil. And this is kind of what you have going on here. Most scholars believe that Jesus probably grew up more in the Hillel version of teaching and school of thought, but either way, both are wrong. Both are missing the mark. One, the Hillel version says that if you're just frustrated with your spouse, you can be done. You can walk away from it. And the Shammai version says that if there's an affair, can you get a divorce? Other than that, you're not going to have it. And we have differences even inside of churches. There's some denominations, churches that just, they don't take it lightly at all. I'm thinking of a few, I don't need to mention them, where people literally leave the church because of how heavy-handed the church handles marriage. You're going through a terrible season in your life, and there's just no compassion whatsoever. It is either you're married or it never happened, and that's it. And you have to denounce that your marriage ever happened, otherwise you're going to be in sin for the rest of your life. And so you have that version, and then you have the other version where they just have no regards for marriage. You have where it's, get married, divorce, it is what it is. Like, we'll work through it, right? Everyone gets divorced, so why not, get the first one out of your system, find the one that God truly has for you, kind of thing. And everywhere in between. And like I've said before, as a pastor that tries to find the middle, the center, the right teaching, it is hard to find the middle sometimes because there's different teachings, and you don't ever go online because there's 1,000 different blogs that will prove you right and the other person wrong, no matter what the perspective is. And so it's hard to find center point. Jesus, the Jews that he was speaking to, they struggled with it too. Jesus didn't struggle, but he had struggled oftentimes, as you'll read in a moment, to bring clarity where there was confusion. And so, not getting tripped up on Deuteronomy chapter 24, it's at the heart of it. It is talking about someone who is unrepentant and gets divorced multiple times for the same unrepentant sin. So not getting tripped up on maybe the abrupt language in Deuteronomy chapter 24. Let's read the next verse in Matthew chapter 5, which is verse 32, which is now the Sermon on the Mount. We're back to it. This is the next verse. Jesus speaking, "But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife except on the grounds of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Huge point of confusion. Let's talk about this. I want to bring some light to this. So it sounds like Jesus, who, although he was most likely raised in a Hillel kind of perspective, just 100% proved the Shammai right. That is only if it's an affair can you get a divorce. And I want to talk about that because Jesus is not saying an exclusive list, as you'll understand in a moment. It's not an exclusive list, but he's bringing gravity to a situation. In this day and age, there was, because of the two different perspectives, over here you had the very strict perspective where mostly women, but I'm sure maybe there were some men in there too, but mostly women were being completely abused by their husbands, emotionally, physically, because the only way that they could get divorced and leave their husband was a certificate of divorce because of an affair, and they weren't going to go do that. And so on the strict side, anything short of an affair, they had to stay married to the person. On the more lax side, over here, they were creating a culture, and this was the culture that was more rampant. They were creating a culture of marry and get a divorce. Try it out. Let's see what happens. You know what? I don't like you. You're nagging me. Get to the curb. Here's the certificate of divorce. I'm sick and tired of you. All right? I'm sure we've all, if you're married, you've had those moments in the back of your mind. Hopefully you've never said it. But in the back of your mind where you thought like, oh, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go get some Burger King. Like, I'm just like, I've had enough. I'm sick of this. Right? Well, the culture that they were creating was, okay, fine. Go to the priest, get a certificate, you're good. And so we have these two things, and both were abusive. Both were not representing the heart of God. Jesus begins to bring clarity. He says, except on the grounds of sexual immorality, and this says here, makes her commit adultery. Well, why would that make her commit adultery? If there is a divorce for not on the grounds of sexual immorality, and you go and get married, according to the perspective of God, you should never have gotten a divorce. And so as someone who in the eyes of God is still married, you're committing adultery. And it says here that whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. It's not saying any divorced woman. It's in context. It's saying if you marry someone who never should have gotten divorced in the first place, according to the word of God, you're committing adultery. Very heavy-handed language. And I understand, 100% understand the implications of that. There are some of you right now going, whoa, he's talking about me. Wait a minute. That's exactly my situation. That's exactly what happened to us. And you're maybe offended by that. You're maybe scared by that. You may be insecure by that. There's a world of what ifs in there. Just stay connected on this for a moment. We're weeding through some difficult patches of land right now, trying to find where this all lands, because we're seeing the mountain from different perspectives, and we're gonna get to the top of the mountain in a moment. But Jesus, again, primarily is calling out the rampant and trivial divorce culture that was created. He's bringing gravity back to the Hillel perspective, which says we should not get rid of our spouse for any reason. We're sick of them, we get rid of them. This is ridiculous. What happened to covenant? What happened to commitment? What happened to this being under the eyes and the protection and under the grace of God? Jesus is calling out that rampant, trivial divorce culture that has been created. And again, if you marry and by extension sleep with someone that is still married, even if they're not with their husband, if they should never have been divorced in the first place, then you, the word says here, Jesus himself says, you are committing adultery with that person. And so let me say this, some of you, we might need to have a conversation, not punitive, not to call you out and shame you, but there might be some things that we have to minister you through, answer some questions to the best of our ability. There might be some forgiveness that needs to take place. There might need to be what's called soul ties that are broken. I can't do all this and talk about all of it right now, but some of you, you have entered into your relationship that you're in right now, that you're married to right now, in a wrong way. And I am thankful that there is grace. Grace for when we rebel, grace for when we sin and we miss the mark. I am thankful for that grace, but we cannot keep closing our eyes, powering through headlong, and pretend like it doesn't matter and it doesn't impact people. It has tremendous impact. And we can't keep sinning, hoping and believing and leaning on the fact that Jesus is just going to forgive us. There is grace when we humble ourselves. But if we don't humble ourselves and just keep doing it knowing that he'll forgive us, we're not actually asking forgiveness. There's not a repentant heart. There's not grace at that point. And so if you have started who you are married to wrong, if you have done that, let us connect with you. Let us pray with you. Let us work and minister through that. God's not looking to punish. God is not looking to, again, shame and expose you that way. But there might be, most likely, there are some things that need to be ministered through that cannot be addressed in a sermon like this. Some of you right now, you are in the middle of a relationship that you should not be in because of some of the things that I'm reading right now, and that needs to just stop. It's a whole story when someone gets married into circumstances that are wrong and they should not have done, regardless of their reasoning. That's one thing. Let's find some grace. Let's find some clarity for that. But if you're in the middle of a dating relationship right now and it is based on something that should not be according to the word of God, it needs to stop. There's not, well, we'll get married and God will forgive us. It needs to stop. This is hard, I know. You got to understand, this was more hard for them than it is for us, I believe. Here's why. The implications in that day and age, when someone was given a certificate of divorce, if they were given a certificate of divorce because of sexual immorality or because of an affair, by law, they were now able to be stoned to death. Okay? Not that it always happened. It didn't always happen, to be clear. Right? There's a lot of times people stepped in. There's a lot of times people had mercy and all that stuff. But according to the law of the land at that point in Jewish culture, if you had an affair, you were stoned to death. So imagine these men who were sick and tired of their wife, right, handing them a divorce, saying they're out. That, certificate of divorce, that legal document, for many of them, became a death sentence. Now, we may not have that in our day and age, but let's be honest. For many of people, when you go through a divorce, socially, financially, emotionally, it's a death sentence. Not that you won't live, not that you can't move on, not that you're somehow incomplete, but you have drastically ramped up the level and the pressure of things that are against you. The hurdles that you now have to jump over because of the divorce has greatly increased. I grew up in a home where my parents were together and are still together, but before they got married and had me, they both had marriages before that and children from that. I saw the complications of that. I didn't feel it because it wasn't my parents that were divorced per se, but I felt it, I saw it, I saw the pain and the frustration and all those things, and it goes on, and that's their story. But at the end of the day, divorce brings so much turmoil into people's lives. It's not just what does the husband and wife want. It impacts children, it impacts friends, impacts church, it impacts everywhere. It is a death sentence for most people. They keep living, but they're living under the burden of so much that God never intended for them to live under. And some of you caused the divorce. Some of you're the victim of the divorce. Again, every story is different. There's a wide range of people that are in this room and watching right now that are coming at this. Some of you are furious at me for saying that. Some of you are broken. I'm reading the words of Jesus. I'm trying to bring clarity to it. This is a difficult conversation because culture, like a massive crushing wave, is pushing up against what Jesus is saying. Culture is saying it's okay, you find your best life, you make sure you have your freedom, you find your experience. If it's not that person, it'll be another person. Culture is saying one thing, and not only just divorce, culture is massively advertising and promoting practice for divorce. And all of our dating relationships and all of the have sex with anybody that you want and test drive and this, that, and the other thing, it is announcing and celebrating and pushing people to practice dating and breaking up, courting and breaking up, this, that, and you're just used to, whoa, I don't like you anymore. Whoa, this just got difficult. Wow, you just said something against me that I don't like. I'm done with you. We are practicing divorce before we ever get married. It's not a wonder that when we get married and we run into really rough times, and I'm not putting any shame blanket on anybody, but when we run into rough times, it's easier for us to cut and run in this day and age and in this society than it should be. There is a pressure that Jesus brings back to it, I believe a godly pressure that says that we should not just divorce for any reason. There's another scriptural reference that gives us grounds for divorce. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10 through 16. Certainly not going to read it. It's called the Pauline privilege or the Pauline exception. So now this is Paul that's speaking, and it's summed up. It means, what it says here is that you also have grounds for divorce if you have been abandoned by an unbeliever. Now this out clause has been greatly abused by people. They go, well, okay, my spouse did not have an affair, but I've been abandoned by them. You know, they're not emotionally there for me anymore, or, you know, this, that, other thing. Like we can probably take abandonment and apply that to almost everything we don't like about that person and go, I have grounds for divorce. And I'm not making light of it. The reality is there are people and in relationships where you are abandoned, even if they're still living there, where you are fully abandoned by someone who is operating as if they're an unbeliever. I'm not saying that they actually aren't saved, but they are acting like and operating as an unbeliever. And so in this, Paul is saying there is an exception that if you have been abandoned by an unbeliever, that you have grounds for divorce. But again, people have greatly abused this and too quickly used this. Well, I hope what you're hearing is you're not getting bogged down by the details. I hope what you're hearing is the heart of God is for marriage. The heart of God is to fight through the difficulties, to pray through them, to ask the Holy Spirit to lead and guide through your marriage, through the blood, sweat, and tears of marriage, because God values it and honors it. It's important. And it should. Divorce is only a last-ditch effort according to the Word of God. Now, I want to be abundantly clear. There are circumstances that I can't begin to wrap around today. There are moments like a physical abuse, emotional abuse that is so wrong. Listen, I can't answer everything in this message, but what I'm asking you is this. If you're struggling right now, if you're wondering, where am I at on this? I feel like I need to get out. I feel like I'm so hurt by this person. I'm confused about my past. I'm confused about where I am right now and all the different details in between. All I can say is this, please. Not that I have the answers, all of them, but I am asking you, if you need help and direction, get prayer after service. But if you need more than that, please reach out to us as a church and as a pastoral team and as a leadership team. We will do everything we can to hear your story, to minister to you, to walk with you, to find grace, to understand, to not just sign and say, well, this is the 1-2 things that you need to do, but literally live life with you and do whatever we can to bring about the goodness of God in your life. So what I don't want is for you to leave here angry, disgruntled over maybe something that I did not say the right way. I'm asking you, if you feel frustrated or confused, I'm asking you to please fight the right kind of fight and come and ask for guidance. And we will do everything we can to minister the goodness of God to you. I don't want to leave you spiraling after this message, trying to figure things out. I want you to be ministered to the right way. Matthew chapter 19, verses 3-6. This is a very important portion of scripture. And the Pharisees came to him, came to Jesus, and they began to test him, asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? Jesus responding said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning, male and female, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is God's pattern, the way he wants it, created together, brought together, become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Here's important. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. Obviously, because of the things that we've read, we know that God does permit and does allow divorce. It needs to be done the right way. It needs to be done hopefully with encouragement and with the right kind of mentoring and support. If you do go through a divorce, not encouraged to get divorced, but encouragement to walk through it while still maintaining your godly character, maintaining your integrity. That's important. It's not just divorced or not divorced, it's how you live your life out as you walk through that and after it, okay? And so God permits it, but God is saying here that this is not what he wants. It says what God has joined together. Who joined married people together? God did. There's a massive difference between the civil marriage, where you get the certificate that you can go down to the courthouse and do and have a judge do that. A big difference between the civil commitment and the spiritual covenant that takes place between two believers. And people get those confused all the time because they usually happen at the same time. You come in, the pastor does his thing, you guys get married, and we just witnessed a marriage. And what takes a marriage? The certificate and the blessing of God. So many of you might even be in here and all you have is the civil certificate and you don't have the blessing of God over your marriage. Let's talk about that. Let's look at what a rededication and what a recommitment like that looks like and how we can walk you through that and how you can ask officially God's blessing to be on your marriage. Because God has joined in a Christian marriage, not a non-Christian marriage. I'm not talking about anybody other than Christian marriage. God has joined together and he says, do not separate. And so God does not encourage divorce, but he permits it. I have Play-Doh here. I remember playing with this as a kid. My parents hated it because we get it in the carpet all the time, and it never came out. No matter, the directions say let it dry and then vacuum it up. That's not how that works. Not at all. So I have two things of Play-Doh here. Red, girls, blue, boys, right? God's plan. God created male and female, brought them together. And so God brings us together. And what he doesn't do, he doesn't say, okay, cool. You guys are together. You're married. But if you ever want to get a divorce, just go ahead and peel away. You go your way, and you go your way. All right? Minimal damage, minimal shrapnel. That's not how God does it. When God joins us together, it says, no longer are they two flesh, but they become one flesh. And God begins to mold and twist and bring them together where now they are starting, just for this purpose, beginning to look and they're acting like one person, right? One person right here. This is what God has brought together, one flesh. But there is a relentless barrage of attacks pulling against you in your marriage at all times. From media, from society, from friends, just tearing apart at the seams of your marriage. Your own thoughts, your own insecurities, your own fears, your past that you didn't deal with. There is your best friend's advice who's been divorced 7 times who thinks you should get a divorce. There is a peeling and pulling and ripping and tearing apart at marriage at all the time. And we're doing everything we can to hold this apart. And then on top of it, we have unforgiveness towards that spouse, and we have unmet expectations and all of these things that are just beginning to tear apart. And what God meant to be together, he says, let no man tear apart. Continuing on, the next portion of that says, they said to him, then why did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce? Talking about Deuteronomy 24 again, and to send her away. So now they're blaming God. Then tell us why Moses said we should get divorced, why Moses said that we should have a certificate. Tell us why all this civil stuff came about. Explain that to us, teacher. Verse 8, he said to them, because of the hardness of your heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning, it was not so. And so when you begin to hear the heart of this, it wasn't Deuteronomy chapter 4 where it says, if you're sick of her, divorce her, get rid of her. God's saying, Moses had to let you do this because your heart was hard and cold against your spouse. It's not the design, it's not the plan, it's not the first and best plan of God. The reality is divorce is a result of pride or sin or both in one or both parties. Divorce is because of sin in the heart of one or most likely both parties. Now, I don't say that to say, here's shame because you're divorced. Pastor's saying it's because it's your fault and you were a sinner. Don't hear what I'm not saying. What I am saying is the hardness of our hearts is why we get to the conversation and eventually the action of divorce to begin with. It is the sin, the pride, and the hardness of our heart. God didn't want it that way. It was never meant to be that way. In fact, Christina, can you come up here? I need you to separate the red from the blue. You got this. You're one of my artsy ones. You got this. Just figure it out. Separate. Make sure they can see what you're doing. Separate the red from the blue.
Nice blue there.
Do you think you're going to be able to get it? I mean, maybe just do some chunks. Like here, this is a big red chunk, right? There's a chunk. That's red. We'll put red together. We'll put all of our blues together. Let's just try to kind of like, it's okay. Well, you're not doing much better. I'm not seeing you coming through like a champ. All right, stop for a second. The reality is, do you think this will ever be able to be blue, separated from red?
No.
Will it ever be able to go back in these little tubs?
No.
Okay, my point on that, and you can go ahead and sit down, thank you. My point on that, guys, is this. Even according to Moses, according to Jesus, according to Paul, even when you get divorced, because two have become one, there is so much damage that's done. Damage to families, to children, to your heart, your spouse's heart. No one, and I mean no one, gets out of a marriage unscathed. No one walks away with all of their Play-Doh. You walk away with parts, especially emotionally, you walk away with heart ties and heart moments and things like that, that you're not getting out, separated out. What God joined together, let no man separate. Now, my point on that is this: God still allows divorce. Paul, Moses still allows it. If you're thinking of that or struggling with that, again, talk to us. We'll minister the best we can with kindness and compassion. But I'm telling you right now, when you go down that road, you toy, and by the way, it starts off with toying with it in your imagination. And eventually the imagination gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then now that becomes the only option. The only viable option, because you have literally built it up in your imagination so much. When you do that, just like inevitably the Play-Doh that's going to be jammed into this carpet, you have a mess on your hands. Generations have been changed, have been ruined, have been greatly negatively impacted because of this. And I'm not saying that you're a terrible person and God doesn't love you and there's no redemption and there's no way to make right what's wrong. I'm not saying that. Please don't hear that. What I'm saying is we need to have the heart of God more on this. It is messy. And right now, you're trying to think through all the angles possibly. I'm asking you for the next few moments as I end this out, stop. Every question, every anger, every confusion, stop. In the notes, I provided what I feel is a very good and very in-depth teaching on the mobile app and the website. It's called The Teaching of Jesus on Divorce. It's a Bible.org article. You can read that on your own time. But I am asking you right now, if your mind's racing, to stop. I want to read something to you as I end this service. Malachi chapter 2. Verse 13 through 16. You know Malachi, most of us know this as the tithing verse. It's the one we don't like to hear. Don't rob God of your tithes and your offerings. But before God said that, this is what he said. You cover the Lord's altar with tears and weeping and groaning because he pays no attention to your offerings. It doesn't accept them with pleasure. In other words, he's saying, listen, you come, whether it be a physical altar like this or just in your private time with God, and you're weeping and you're crying out and you're groaning and you're wondering, God, why are you not listening to my prayers? And this is what is said. You cry out, why doesn't the Lord accept my worship? You gotta be careful when you ask questions because there's an answer. It says, I'll tell you why. Because the Lord witnessed your vows, or the vows you and your wife made when you were young. The Lord saw them, blessed them, witnessed them. But you have been unfaithful to her. And we think unfaithful as sexually unfaithful, but that's not what it says. It doesn't say sexual immorality. It says you have been unfaithful to her. Though she remained your faithful partner, the wife of your marriage vows. Didn't the Lord make you one with your wife? In body and spirit, you are his. And what does he want? What does God want? Many different things from us that he empowers us to do, but this is what it says. He wants godly children from your union. So guard your heart, remain loyal to the wife of your youth. And this is so important, verse 16. God saying this, for I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel. To divorce your wife is to overwhelm her with cruelty. Another translations say to cover her with a cloak of violence. Divorce is overwhelming yourself and that person with cruelty and violence. May not be physical violence, but it literally is that death sentence. It is the cruelty and it is the violence that you overwhelm them with, says the Lord of heaven's armies. So again, it reminds us, guard your heart. Do not be unfaithful to your wife. Do not be unfaithful to your spouse. It starts in the heart Not talking about sexual immorality here. Don't be unfaithful. Don't let your imagination and your heart wander from the vows that you made that God witnessed. Lord, I ask right now, I'm over on time, I'm over on everything right now. I got Play-Doh all over my stage. But Lord, I just ask, God, that you help us to shut out the noise, clear out the distractions. And God, I ask above all else, there's 1,000 things I could ask for, but I ask above all else, Lord, that you reopen our eyes and ignite our hearts to see how important and beautiful and significant and powerful it is when a husband and wife, as imperfect as they are, will fight through the terrible moments, will fight not against each other, but will fight with each other, ministering to each other and ministering to you. God, that they would see themselves as ministers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They would see themselves as generation builders and as people that have a massive and important impact on the world around them. God, I ask that you ignite on the inside of us a deep reverence for marriage once again. If we have lost it, if we have toyed around with it in our own heart, if we have laughed at it, if we've scoffed at it, if it's something that our imagination has spent way too much time thinking about, God, that you would arrest our thoughts and our actions and our imagination, and you would bring us to a place of holy reverence to a holy God who says that you hate divorce. God, forgive us for causing, even if we have not gotten divorced, for causing in our hearts violence and shame and rejection to be placed on our spouses. And Lord, I pray specifically for those that are not married, God, that maybe one day will be married. They're not incomplete right now. They're not lacking anything. You love them exactly who they are. But if they find somebody and if they get married, Lord, I pray, God, that they would walk into that marriage with a eyes wide open kind of covenant, with a commitment and a vow that they mean, that will last beyond the feelings and the emotions and the wedding day and the cake, that it will be something that is rooted and grounded in the godliness of you and in your word and in what you have designed and created marriage to be. Lord, that we would not bow to the idols of culture, that we would not be people that would just do as good as the rest of the world, but we would be a shining light and an example of what it means for Christian believers to be married and to have strong, healthy, vibrant marriages. Lord, we thank you for this. Give us humble hearts, convict us if there is sin, if there is unrepentant things in our lives, that we would live with purity, with purpose, and that we would live as those that are submitted to you. We thank you for this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.